How might poetry help us decolonize our minds? That's exactly what I want to talk about today. And I have a poem I think that's perfect for that. When I talk about decolonizing our minds, I'm talking about pushing up against some of the deep assumptions that are no longer serving us if they ever did. And one of those deep assumptions, have you noticed, is that war is considered to be necessary, needed, and actually natural to the human condition. And I'm not so sure that we're not ready to question that particular set of assumptions. And the poem I've chosen for us today to talk about this, to at least tease up to this ability that we may have to question some of these cultural assumptions, indeed, to decolonize our minds and hearts. This poem by the great poet Pablo Neruda, who wrote a poem called Keeping Quiet. And see if you can recognize the parts that really push up against some of these assumptions about war. Keeping Quiet, Pablo Neruda. This poem was originally written in Spanish, and this particular translation is by the great poet Robert Bly. The poem goes like this. Now we will count to 12. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. And we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea, fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales. And the men gathering salt would look at his hurt hands, and the man gathering salt would look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes, and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing, doing nothing, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. If we were not so single-minded, about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness. Perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves, and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now, I'll count to 12. Now, I'll count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. Perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now, I will count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and and I will go. If we are going to decolonize our minds and hearts, part of that, maybe an important part, is to question the idea that war is necessary, needed, and natural, because those are the assumptions that have come down through the recent times. Poems, I think, can push up against these kinds of norms, these kinds of assumptions, these kinds of images that we have taken into our bodies, into our minds, into our hearts. These poems can begin to push up against that. We can question the validity of these assumptions about the way things are. Is war necessary and needed and natural? I don't know. But it is an assumption that we, I believe, can begin to question. Perhaps the earth can teach us, says Pablo Neruda, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I will count up to 12 and you be quiet and I will go. Thank you so much for your listening ear. Thank you for being a part of this podcast, Dale Byron on Poetry. And we say a podcast for our stunningly beautiful and troubled world, our stunningly beautiful and troubled world. And as I always say, again, thank you for your listening ear. If you know someone that might enjoy this poetry, please pass it along to them. And if you haven't subscribed to whichever of the platforms that you listen to this on, please do so. And until next time and next poem or poems, please take good care of yourself. And if you can, take good care of someone else.